The first night in my dream lake house was supposed to be peaceful. Then my phone rang. My older brother didn't congratulate me. He didn't ask permission. He laughed and said, "Mom, Dad, and I will be there tomorrow morning. We already packed. Dad says it's a family house now." My hands actually started shaking. I looked around at my brand new home, smiled, and spent the next 12 hours preparing a welcome none of them ever expected. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 42 years old, and the biggest mistake my family ever made was believing that because I stayed quiet, I would always give them whatever they wanted. For 20 years, I worked in corporate project management, surviving impossible deadlines, endless conference calls, and 70-hour work weeks. Every vacation was canceled. Every holiday was interrupted by emails. By the time I finally resigned, I wasn't chasing luxury anymore. I was chasing silence. That silence came in the form of a modest lake house tucked away beside a peaceful stretch of water in northern Wisconsin. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy. But every dollar of the down payment came from my own savings. Every mortgage payment would come from my own account. For the first time in my life, something belonged entirely to me. The morning I received the keys, I stood on the wooden dock watching sunlight dance across the lake. The only sounds were birds, gentle waves, and the wind moving through the pine trees. I remember thinking, nobody gets to take this away from me. Looking back now, that thought almost feels ironic. Growing up, my older brother, Ryan, never heard the word no. If he forgot to pay a bill, my parents covered it. If he lost another job, they blamed his boss. When he borrowed money, everyone called it help. When I earned something, it somehow became something the whole family could share. I was the dependable one. I studied hard, worked overtime, paid my own college loans, and never asked for rescue. Somehow, responsibility became an expectation instead of an achievement. When I bought the lake house, my parents congratulated me, but even over the phone, their excitement felt strangely casual. Ryan barely acknowledged it at all. I assumed he simply wasn't interested. I was wrong. That first evening, I unpacked boxes, ordered takeout, and watched the sunset from the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. It felt like the beginning of a completely different life. Then my phone rang. Ryan. I smiled, thinking maybe he was finally calling to congratulate me. Instead, he laughed before I could even say hello. "Good news," he said. "Mom, Dad, and I are moving into your lake house tomorrow." I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "You heard me. Dad already approved it. The house is way too big for one person, and Mom loves the lake. We'll bring our stuff in the morning." I stared out at the dark water. "You didn't ask me." "There wasn't anything to ask," he replied. "We're family. If you don't like it, you can always stay somewhere else for a while." My hands tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. Then something unexpected happened. I smiled. "Okay," I said calmly. "I'll be ready for all of you tomorrow." After hanging up, I locked the front door, looked around my beautiful new home, and started preparing a welcome my family would never forget. I barely slept that night, not because I was scared, because I finally understood something I'd spent 42 years ignoring. People who refuse to respect your boundaries don't stop because you explain yourself better. They stop when the boundaries become impossible to cross. At 6 the next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney. After listening quietly, she said, "Emma, this is your property. If anyone enters without your permission, they're trespassing. Don't argue. Don't threaten. Just document everything." The second call was to my insurance company. I wanted every detail of my homeowner's policy confirmed before anyone arrived. The third call was to a local locksmith. "I'd like every exterior lock replaced this morning," I said. He asked, "Emergency service?" "Very much so." By 8 o'clock, I had also installed 2 temporary security cameras overlooking the driveway and front porch. I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I simply wanted an accurate record of whatever happened. Then I gathered every important document I owned: the property deed, closing paperwork, mortgage agreement, tax records, home insurance, utility accounts. Every page clearly showed one name: mine. I placed them neatly inside a folder on the dining room table. Before sitting down with a cup of coffee, I walked next door and introduced myself to my closest neighbors, Tom and Linda, a retired couple who had lived on the lake for almost 15 years. I didn't exaggerate. I simply explained that some family members might arrive believing they had permission to move into my house. Tom raised an eyebrow. They have keys.
No.
They own the property.
No.
He smiled. Then I don't think they'll be staying very long. At exactly 9:17 a.m., I heard the sound of a diesel engine. A large moving truck rolled slowly into my driveway. Behind it came my parents' SUV. Ryan climbed out first, grinning as though he had just won the lottery. He stretched his arms wide. "Nice place," he called. "Mom's already picked out which bedroom she wants." My mother stepped onto the porch carrying 2 decorative pillows. "I knew these would look perfect in the guest room," she said without even greeting me. Dad looked around the property like a man inspecting something he'd built himself. "We'll probably need to clear out that storage shed," he announced. "Ryan has fishing gear." I stood quietly by the front door. Ryan walked toward me with his hand extended. "Keys."
No.
He laughed. "Come on." I said no. His smile disappeared. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean nobody is moving into my home." Dad sighed dramatically. "Emma, don't make this difficult. Families help each other." "I already have," I answered. "For most of my life." Ryan took another step forward. "This isn't just your decision. It actually is." Mom folded her arms. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I've finally stopped apologizing for owning something." Ryan pointed toward the moving truck. "Start unloading," he shouted to the movers. None of them moved. They looked at me instead. "I don't authorize anyone to enter this property," I said clearly. At that exact moment, the locksmith finished replacing the final deadbolt on the front door. He handed me a small envelope containing the new keys. Ryan stared in disbelief. "You changed the locks?" "I did." His face turned bright red. "You seriously think a few locks are going to stop us?" Before I could answer, the quiet morning was interrupted by another vehicle turning into the driveway. A police cruiser rolled slowly to a stop behind the moving truck. 2 officers stepped out. Ryan's confident smile vanished almost instantly. I slipped the folder of ownership documents under my arm, took one deep breath, and walked calmly toward them. The 2 officers walked toward us without any urgency, just calm professionalism.
"Good morning," one of them said.
"We received a request to keep the peace during a possible property dispute." Ryan stepped forward before I could speak. "There isn't a dispute," he said confidently. "We're moving into my sister's place. She's just overreacting."
The officer looked at me.
"Ma'am, do you own this property?" "Yes." I handed him the folder I'd prepared the night before. Inside were the deed, closing documents, my driver's license, and every paper showing the house belonged solely to me. He spent a minute reviewing them before handing everything back. "Thank you." Then he turned toward Ryan. "Sir, do you have any legal ownership of this property?" Ryan crossed his arms. "No, but we're family." The officer nodded politely. "I understand. Do you have a lease agreement? Written permission? Anything showing you're authorized to live here?" Ryan's silence answered for him. Dad finally stepped in. "I'm her father. That should count for something." The second officer spoke gently. "It does in a family sense, sir. Legally, it doesn't give you the right to enter someone else's home without permission." Mom's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. "Emma," she said, "you're really doing this to your own parents?" I looked at her quietly.
"No, Mom."
"I'm refusing to let you do this to me." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The lake behind us was perfectly still. Even the movers stood awkwardly beside the truck, pretending not to listen. Ryan finally snapped. "You've always been selfish." I almost laughed. Selfish. I looked at each of them. "When you couldn't pay rent, I loaned you money." Ryan looked away. "When Dad needed help after surgery, I used my vacation days." Neither parent answered. "When Mom wanted a new car, I helped with the down payment." Silence. I spent decades proving I loved this family. Somehow, Every sacrifice became an expectation instead of a gift. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We're family. I know. I took a slow breath. But family doesn't mean taking something another person worked 20 years to earn. The first officer finally spoke again. I'm going to ask everyone who isn't authorized to occupy this property to leave peacefully. Ryan looked ready to argue. Then he noticed the movers quietly climbing back into their truck. Without a house to unload into, there wasn't much left to say. Dad shook his head. I never thought you'd choose a house over your family. I met his eyes. I didn't. I chose self-respect. One by one, they climbed back into their vehicles. The moving truck pulled away first. My parents followed. Ryan slammed his door so hard I thought the window might shatter. Within minutes, the driveway was empty again. The officers wished me well before leaving. The locksmith waved from his van. Tom and Linda gave me a discreet thumbs up from across the road before heading back inside. I stood alone on my porch, listening to the breeze move across the lake. The silence I'd dreamed about had finally returned. A few weeks later, my parents reached out and apologized for assuming they could simply move in. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was honest. Ryan, however, never admitted he had crossed a line. He insisted I'd embarrassed him and overreacted. For the first time in my life, I didn't argue. I simply accepted that not everyone is willing to take responsibility for their choices. These days, I wake up before sunrise, make coffee, and watch the light spread across the water from the same dock where I stood on my first morning. The house is still peaceful. The locks are still mine. And every time I unlock the front door, I'm reminded that protecting your peace isn't cruel. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is finally say one word you've been afraid to say your entire life.
No.